The state should create conditions where enterprise flowers. Enterprise. It doesn't matter whether the enterprise is as small as that of a small pawn shop in remote Bihar, or for that matter, our biggest industrialists who are contributors, or for those who come from overseas and set up businesses here. Can we have say to ourselves in the 15 to 20-year scenario that India will be seen as a country where enterprise flowers? So there are many things that will make that happen. Everything from providing good infrastructure to good policy frameworks to good amounts of training and so everything comes under that ambit of saying we need an environment in this country where great provocation and encouragement is given to enterprise.
I think the government's job is to be the facilitator. It must be the overarching entity that allows these things to develop. Now the government cannot and should not do all these things. It must stand in where people have abdicated their responsibility, for example. I mean, I don't know how many private hospitals want to go to a really poor area where people have no capacity to pay. There the government's job is there to provide services.
People have historically looked at everything outside of their own sphere of direct interest as the government's responsibility. And I think that has actually made a us versus them kind of a environment. And I think if society starts engaging more directly with issues that matter to it, I think automatically you will actually see better governance at work. Very simply, if smaller units of society are involved with their community, you will automatically see better delivery of government services in that community for sure. I mean, often it is actually apathy and the knowledge of knowing that people don't care, which results in the downslide that we typically see in delivery of most government goods and services. So I actually feel that if we get people who are much more engaged, if a lot more people care about the state of education in this country other than simply bemoaning it, and those who can afford it will just send their children abroad. I mean, unless we start engaging in figuring out how to create islands of excellence which then become infectious and spread through the broader public system, nothing's going to happen in education unless we figure out ways how to create role models of low-cost healthcare delivery in the private sector. It's not going to put pressure on the government to run their hospitals better and more efficiently. So I think there is a big role that civil society and the private sector at large can play. And I think very importantly, the CSR bill, for all the criticism that it has received, in my view, will be a massive game changer in how the private sector engages with social enterprise. I think there will be people who will care a lot about the 2% that they are spending, and will want to spend it in very thoughtful ways and in a way in which it will address very specific problems. And I think that will create the opportunity for others to follow.
In my mind, it's a circle. Heart, mind and action are linked. It starts with the heart, then goes to the mind, and then the action, and then there's a virtuous circle. And if you had any influence on civil society, government, companies and so on, that's the sequence in which I would and what can you do in those regards? If you stir up people's hearts and have no action plan, or you have no products of the mind, it will all die. The circle, the ball doesn't bounce anymore. And I think the best way, if I may quote, is the motto of my old institute at IIT Kharagpur, the Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. Yoga, whatever knowledge you have, Karmasu, do it and be skilled at repeating this cycle. Don't talk, don't dream. So dreams, talk and action have to follow in a synergy. It comes back to my holistic point.
I think society is going to have to play a larger role and will increasingly determine what technologies are successful and which not, will increasingly have a voice in determining the direction in which technologies are supposed to be moving or will move. On the other hand, I believe the public sector or the government sector will increasingly need to take a step back from active involvement to regulation and create an environment for the private sector to really step out and give its best. But there is a requirement for all three, and each one of those three has a role to play.
And it's a different role.
And it's a different role. And we need to make sure that we keep those roles exactly black and white in those different areas. Because the moment you start blurring them over there, that's when we start taking a step back, slowing down.
Overwhelming pressure of the market is to think short term, not long term, which is why it's very difficult to build consensus around environmental responsibility and such like. So you can change the behavior of the markets. If you were to if the democratized shareholding of companies, right, were driven by the long-term values of those shareholders. So there is a growing environmental consciousness among shareholders. So if shareholders thought about the long term rather than just how they're going to make profits over the financial year, then that will drive eventually appropriate behavioral change in the private sector.